Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Education Institute's Wild and Kind Wednesday. This is an ongoing series that is following on from the International Festival of Wild and Kind Ideas that happened in May. So, all throughout June and all throughout July, we're having a more leisurely pace of conversations rather than the full 6 days of multiple events. So, this is an opportunity to really sort of slow down and to lean into these questions and to be part of the conversations too. My guest today, my guests actually, I should say, my guests today are John Seed and Erika Aligno, and I'll introduce them in a minute, but I just wanted to first acknowledge that I'm calling in from the unceded lands of the Jinnabur and Gubbi Gubbi people here in southeast Queensland. And I'd love to invite you to open up the chat and let us know where you're calling in from. And if you know the country on which you're seated to also put that in. So welcome to you all. It's an absolute delight and pleasure to be in conversation with you here again today. The first part of this session will be in conversation with John and Erika, and then we'll open up for questions and discussion. So please feel free to use either the chat as a place to drop questions, and also if you wanted to use the sort of the hand up feature of the menu down the bottom here, it'll sort of put up a little hand for you like this, and I'll see you and I can bring you in to actually be here in the conversation too. So we'll have lots of different ways. If you want to come in and be on screen with us, we love you to do that. But if you just feel like dropping in a chat, that is also okay. Also, I'd like to acknowledge and thank anyone who has donated when you joined up to this event. Every single cent that comes into these events, whether it be the festival, our film club, these wild and kind conversations, gets gathered by the Ethos Foundation and sent 100% to wild and kind projects in parts of the world, like refugee settlements in Uganda and Kenya, and Indigenous projects, and just really amazing programs that hopefully you've had a chance to look at when you came to the festival. We featured a number of the people doing those projects. So I'm looking up here to keep letting people are starting to flood in now, which is absolutely fabulous. So I would like to introduce now John C. Let me bring you in, John, and Erika. So welcome, John, and welcome, Erika. Our conversation today is around deep ecology, but also the intersection with permaculture. John Seed, I've known for, gosh, a very long time now, John. I can't remember when we first met, but we are all here part of the Institute for Deep Ecology. And also, John is sort of the founder of deep ecology in Australia, and he worked with Joanna Macy in crafting the Council of All Beings and published a book called Thinking Like a Mountain, which you may have seen. It's available on John's website, and that was co-written with Arnie Ness, Pat Fleming, Joanna Macy, and John. And Erika comes from a legal background, and I'm going to have to ask you to introduce yourself in all of the beautiful background of dimensions that you've come from to land yourself deeply in deep ecology. John has a poem to begin us. I'm going to hand the mic over to you now, John. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Morag. I found that deep ecology is much better experienced through poetry and music than more prosaic style. And so I'd like to start off with a poem about the wide boundary context of where we find ourselves. It's called The Universe Jam by Drew Dellinger. The flame has lit up the world from within. All things, individually and collectively, are interpenetrated and flooded by it. You who mould the manifold so as to breathe your life into it, I pray to you. The first verse of the universe pours forth like a sea of mystery. Out of the void, unmanifest silence. Space-time comes into existence. unseen shaping, swirling, unfurling. Hydrogen, helium, divine is revealed within galactic whirlpools as energy flows in. A star collapses, supernova explosion, a cloud of cosmic debris drawn together by gravity, by the mystery of attraction, primordial bonding, universe action, stardust swirling, swarming gases, organizing and forming masses. See, the sun is the one that spun the nine others, give birth to Mother Earth and her sisters and brothers. Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, every one is the sun. The sun is the one. Everyone. Everybody better wake up. And the earth gave birth to continents and oceans, shaping and shaking in waves of emotion, crashes of lightning, bombarding and striking, exposing the globe as it glows like a strobe and setting the stage for the first cell of life. So simple, so basic, so primal that I place it at the top of the chain from which all life sprang. More forms adorn the earth as they bring diversity dispersing the song of creation. Ring in the dawn, sing along in celebration. I just want to celebrate, celebrate life. I just want to celebrate, celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate, celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. The sea comes alive, starts to thrive with new life forms. Storm swept the planet, plants crept on granite enchanted by the sun's solar power. The earth gave birth to green leaves and flowers. Lava flows, mountains rose, tropical islands, forests and meadows, fed by the freshwater streams, the veins, heavenly rains drain back to the sea. The fish are set free as they swim onto sand, fins onto limbs, and they limp onto land. Amphibians, reptiles, new styles of creature, seeing through new being the range of her features. The earth, your mother, gave birth to eyesight, looking within as she spins in the sunlight. On to the dawn, to the day of the dinosaur. Pterodactyl soars, Tyrannosaurus rex, towering, devouring. So who's up next? Mammals and primates, all life interrelated, divinely created. So don't you think it's time we celebrate it? I just want to celebrate, celebrate life. I just want to celebrate, celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate, celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. Well, that always gets me going. So thanks for
Thank
the
you, John.
opportunity, Morag.
I was going to sing along with you, but I thought better of it. We could have kind of
Oh,
done a whole group sing along, that would have been nice.
well, we could end with that.
Thank you, John. You know what I was thinking of as you were, or not what I was thinking, what I was feeling was doing the deep time walk with Stephen Harding through the Devonian coastline, and took me back to that and remembering so fondly Stefan, a deep ecologist who passed away a year and a bit ago. And actually, John, today, well, this moment in time is about a year since Joanna passed as well. So let's celebrate those lives as well. Mm. Thank you, John. I'd like to hand to Erika to properly introduce us. I did a shocking job of introducing you before, so please yeah um you can do the much better job than I can. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Maybe we can sing later, Morag. That'd be great to tune. Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks, Morag, for this. Yeah, my name's Erika. Yeah, and I've been working with John for the past couple of years, running some deep ecology workshops. And my trajectory of getting and landing here, as you'd mentioned, I was from, a legal background, but I really see my vocation sitting at that intersection of social justice, activism, and more recently, ecological reawakening through deep ecology. And I know I was originally trained as a commercial litigator, and I moved into community legal centers doing communications and advocacy, just supporting people navigating systems that weren't really built for them. And I spent a couple of years volunteering as a lawyer at Redfern Legal Centre, again, providing free legal advice for just people that just were going through hard times. And then I moved over to Inner City Legal Centre, which was also an LGBTIQ rights focus centre. And it was a wonderful moment in that period because it was during that Marriage Equality Act in 2017. And also we established the first free transgender legal service in Australia in 2018. And it was a beautiful time working and speaking alongside a former Australian High Court judge like Michael Kirby. And it was a really wonderful time. And yet throughout that period, and also having a very brief stint as an international conference producer doing random things around the world, there are these questions that the poet David Whyte calls like these questions that have no right to go away. And there was like a question that was patiently waiting for me. It asks me, that quiet whisper in my heart is like, how do I live a life of meaning and purpose? And it was interesting, a couple of weeks ago, John, and we were just, riffing as John and I do. And he was mentioning how Professor Arnie Ness, who coined deep ecology, said he had one definition for deep ecology, and it was to ask deeper questions. And that led me to deeper inquiries into, refining that question, not just about how can I live a life of purpose, but how can we come back together, come back to ourselves, come back to each other? How can humans come back into harmony and circle with the Earth community? And so I didn't know John Seed until 3 years ago, and it was actually through Professor Tema Milstein when I started doing my master's in environmental management. And the way I got there was, after the bushfires, there was like, and seeing that devastation that had happened in 2019 and 2020, statistically, you saw 1.25 billion animal kin just completely wiped out, but it was actually seeing that. And there was something unarticulated inside of me that shifted. And that's when I shifted my focus towards biodiversity conservation with the government, and that's a role that I still play. And I didn't have an environment background, so I leaned into understanding that, and that's how I came to the University of New South Wales. And it was through a visionary professor, Tema Milstein, who's a leader, a friend, and a scholar in research of eco-cultural communication and transformation, that led me to the work, this wonderful work of John Seed and deep ecology. And I think it was the first time that I felt like this invitation from life inviting me to co-create and step into participation with Gaia. And it was really sitting in that truth mandala for the first time that I would describe this like awakening. And so here I am asking deeper questions and sitting here between two greats, John and yourself, Morag. So yeah, there's more.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It really, I felt all of those things that you said just ring so deeply. And there was something when you were talking about that quiet whisper in your heart. And I think that's something that so many of us feel. But then when you mentioned about the bushfires, I felt like there's a screaming that's going on. It wasn't so quiet. And there's moments where it is this quiet whisper that just is always there underneath the surface. But quite often, and more often, I'm feeling it being something that is really loud, and it as this guiding force that means, like, once you sort of tap into that ecological self, like there are no alternatives. I feel like that's the place where you act from. And if I've noticed in my life, if I've sort of stepped somewhere sidewards, I can brought back very quickly. Like, there's something that going on inside that really brings me back into center. Because there was at Schumacher College, where I first met Arnie Ness. Back in 1992, there was a deep ecology workshop happening there, and it was absolutely wonderful to learn with him and with Stephen Harding, and then to connect with John later. And one of the things that I know that Arnie talks about is that it was actually Rachel Carson that inspired him as well. Like, there was a real aha moment. And so, we often attribute like the Arnie Ness to be the father of deep ecology, but in fact, the roots go deeper. So I wonder, John, whether you just like to reflect a bit on where deep ecology has come from, and of course, even be, a deep ecological way of knowing is a way of knowing and being that I think humans have always had. It's just more recently, perhaps we've forgotten that. So perhaps there's two different threads in that conversation you'd like to pick up on, John.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think the first thing that needs to be said is that every Indigenous culture that has maintained its ceremonial life has ceremonies regularly throughout the year where the human community stops what they're doing in order to acknowledge the rest of the Earth community. And that we moderns may be the first human beings in, 250,000 years to have abandoned that ancient knowing that it seems to me there must be a tendency in human beings to drift away into merely social, self-referential identity. And there must be just this tendency to forget. And every surviving culture is marked by the fact that people have found ways to correct for that. And so these ceremonies and rituals of honouring the earth, the remembering all our relations, this is an absolutely vital part of being human. And without it, it seems to me we become lost in the way that we modern people are lost. And so I feel like the deep ecology is an attempt to find our way back, follow the breadcrumbs and find our way back to, pre-colonial, pre-capitalistic, pre-everything, back to our roots.
John, there's a question in the chat from Lise. Sorry if I said that wrong. Could you define deep ecology? Like, I feel in a way you just did, but if you've come across someone for the very first time and they just said, John, what is deep ecology? How do you express that? And maybe Erika, you might like to have a crack at that too.
Yeah, go ahead, Erika.
Oh, I'll thanks, John. I will give a more discerning answer to the person, I guess. I have a particular person in mind when they always ask me, someone who's completely not into permaculture or deep ecology, and they always ask me, what is deep ecology? What do you do? And I try to keep it quite tangible as well. And I literally just say it is, and John has very different, and I would say correct, but the real one that I say to them, it's just the practices in humanity. And I always leave it at that. And I say it's just practices in humanity. And it's interesting what someone asks me. It's like, oh, what is humanity? And I always ask, what is humanity to you? And the answers are, oh, we sit around in circle, we dance, we sing. And I say, yes, it's all of that. We listen to each other. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So I guess my answer is more like, what do we do in deep ecology? And we lean into the practices of humanity. We're in rest. Yeah. And so, yeah. And I'll let John give the more eloquent answer.
Thank you, Erika.
Oh, no, that's pretty eloquent. All right, Erika. But I guess what I'll say that maybe, well, first of all, as you said, Arnie Ness's definition of deep ecology was asking deeper questions. And so whatever, more prosaic answers I give, that's the fundamental answer. And then from there, I'd like to say that deep ecology is understanding that the slide to oblivion upon which modern humanity appears to be accelerating is the result of the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world, and that this illusion of separation is the result of anthropocentrism or human-centeredness, the idea that human beings are the center of everything. So this idea, which we see as far back as the Old Testament, that only human beings have intrinsic value, only human beings are made in the image of God, the rest of nature is just scenery, is just resources for human beings, that this fundamental error has led to an illusion of separation. And in order to, anyone who doubts this can demonstrate the illusory nature of this to themselves very, very quickly by holding their breath for 5 minutes while they think about it. And then we realize that any sense of separation is utterly illusory. We can't separate ourselves even for a few minutes, that we are inextricably embedded in nature, and that we have no independent existence. So intellectually, this isn't much of a leap. Everybody would say, yeah, so what? We all know this. But what Arne Ness said was that because the error of anthropocentrism and the illusion that it generates is so deeply embedded in modern culture, in every institution of our society, in the very language that we speak, we can't think our way out of the mess that's been created. He said that ecological ideas won't save us. What we need is ecological identity, ecological self. And the way to nourish our ecological identity, he said, was through community therapies. And so these community therapies, which Joanna Macy and I then went on to begin to design and construct in the mid-1980s and right up until the present, that these are, it turns out, though we didn't realise it at the beginning, these are synchronous with the ceremonies and rituals that all Indigenous societies practice for the same purpose, to make sure that we don't get lost into merely self-referential ideas of who we are, but that we remain solidly embedded in the actual, real, natural universe that, that we are enmeshed in, that we are woven into, that we are just one strand in this vast web of life. We're not the spider in the middle.
Thank you. Erika, you've been running deep ecology workshops now, and you're about to head to the States a little bit later on in the year. I wondered, and I'd like to ask you too, John, but I thought I might ask you first, Erika, like, what's your experience of being, or one, a participant, but also a host in, I think, are you running Counts of All Being workshops? Maybe you could talk a little bit about what they are and how this sort of ceremony or ritual, you would call it, of deep ecology helps us to find our ecological identity and ecological self, and maybe even just to tease out a bit more about what is this ecological self, ecological identity that we're talking about here.
Thanks, Morag. I'll do my best to describe it. It is, deep ecology for me is knowledge that can't really be eaten sometimes, but I will try my best. It's like, looking at a picture of food, it doesn't really nourish you. You actually have to experience it, because it is an experiential and embodied process. But for me personally, when I'm facilitating deep ecology, there isn't a separation between me participating and facilitating. It's actually, this is why we always sit in circle. I am just a facilitator who is actually participating, so I'm getting as much out of it as well. For me, the council there, and it follows the spiral of the Work That Reconnects, and that was the teachers before me, John and Joanna. And it is a spiral, and John might be able to go into it a bit more. For me personally, when I step into one of the processes, which is the honoring our pain for the world, that particularly for me was something that had, I'd mentioned that it woke me up. It really woke me up in regard to that, because I didn't realize how numb I had felt, or how much I had not articulated the grief that I had felt in regard to the way that I was moving through the world. And I'm quite interested in this word initiation, and not just the word, but also what it actually embodies. And I thought that there wasn't enough initiation in our world, but there isn't actually intentional initiations in our current modern society. But we actually do have initiations. We are initiated into living into an economic system that prioritizes consumption over community. We are initiated in our education system to have, like what John was saying, power over rather than power with nature. We actually do have these initiations, but we're so, we're not listening. Well, I wasn't listening, and I was participating in this modern culture of this kind of initiation. And so deep ecology for me is a pathway for me to resist and turn towards life-affirming ways of being back in harmony with Earth community. And deep ecology is a practice for me to allow myself to notice what is happening. And this is what active hope, what Joanna talks about, to notice what is happening around the world for me, identify the hopes and values that I want for the type of world that we can get back to, and then taking that step forward. And the processes in the spiral and the work that reconnects and deep ecology are all of that. And it invites the breaking of the ego boundary, which is what is built in the modern society, that we're an individual, we can do it all ourselves. And it actually breaks down that boundary and it expands to an ecological itself. And it is through the council of all beings. And it is all of that kind of like the medicine that knowledge can't eat. It is an embodied process. Yeah. So that's sort of,
oh, beautiful.
without going over the top, because I
Thank you. That's gorgeous. John, I want to throw back to you because we mentioned Joanna Macy several times already, and I wonder whether you might just introduce her into this conversation a bit and tell a story perhaps of, when you first started working with her and how together you crafted this council of all beings and then turned a bit to that spiral as well and bring more life into that from your perspective.
Well, I met Joanna, who is my teacher and who is, in my opinion, one of the great souls of this age. I met her in late 1985, and at that time I had been an environmental activist in northern New South Wales for 6 years. My activism started in 1979 when I had a life-changing epiphany while participating in what years later we realised was the first direct action in defence of rainforest in the world. And it just happened to take place in my neighbourhood, and I just happened to show up and was smitten, was blown away, was never the same again. And so I took part in actions to protect rainforests in New South Wales, in Tasmania, in Queensland during those years. And in each case, hard to believe these days, but we won. That the forests we were trying to protect, the development stopped, the logging stopped, and national parks were created, became part of the World Heritage. However, by the mid-1980s, it was clear that for every forest that had been saved in the previous decade worldwide, 1,000 forests had been lost. And clearly there was no way to save the planet one forest at a time, that unless we could address the underlying psychological or spiritual disease that allows modern humans to imagine that we can somehow profit from the destruction of our own life support systems, clearly these actions would be of no particular consequence. And so it was in trying to understand this spiritual dimension to the environmental crisis that I ran into deep ecology and the works of Arnie Ness. And that he was my other great teacher in my life, and I was, again, utterly in awe of his mind. But as he promised, ecological ideas were of no help, including deep ecological ideas, because what was needed was ecological identity, and thinking was not a bridge to ecological identity. And so I was trying to understand what he could have meant by community therapy, which was what he was calling for, when I met Joanna. And so I went to a workshop that she was running at Ballina in northern New South Wales in late 1985 called Despair and Empowerment. And what I learned from her, what we all learned from her, was that the exiled feelings of despair and rage and terror and anguish that are completely unwelcome in our society, that there's never the opportunity where these feelings are honoured, are welcomed. We run away, we hide from them, we're afraid of them, we're afraid we'll be damaged. And she showed us that how to create a safe container to invite these feelings, and that when we do so, the upshot is empowerment. And it was so. There was no doubt about it. Everybody, we discovered that this is so. But at the end of that workshop, in the last circle on the Sunday, I shared that I'd noticed that many people in the despair circle were talking about what was on everybody's mind in 1985, impending nuclear Armageddon as the Cold War raged between superpowers and so on. But that I said I'd noticed that everybody seemed to be concerned about what this nuclear catastrophe would do to a particular species, i.e. humans, and the fact that there were 10 million other species that would also be impacted by a nuclear exchange. It didn't seem to be on people's radar. And I proposed that if we were able to expand our sense of concern to include the myriad species, we'd actually have a much better chance of surviving ourselves. Anyway, Joanna loved that, and in the last month, because it's the year anniversary of her passing, I've posted 5 reels on my Instagram from the last year or two of her life, conversations that we had and so on. And one of those, the first of them, which I must say I was stunned that it's had more than 60,000 views and, extremely popular compared to other things that I post. In that, she remembered that moment when she said, that she'd met John Seed and so on, and that he had sort of said to her, well, you've got to get the anthropocentrism out of this work. And she'd kind of gone, she'd been a bit miffed by that. But anyway, the upshot was that she was just as excited to discover deep ecology as I was excited to discover the despair work. And we realised together that by putting these things together, the ideas of deep ecology and the powerful spiritual technology that she carried with her of how personal and social change could take place, perhaps this would be the foundation for the community therapies that Arnie Ness had been calling for. And so then and there, within a week of meeting, we had constructed together the Council of All Beings, which was the first of the experiential deep ecology processes, the first piece of what we call the Work That Reconnects, and that thousands of people worldwide now are offering and facilitating.
So this experiential deep ecology workshops as a Council of Beings, a Work That Reconnects. What other things are you seeing spreading out into the world, and how are you seeing perhaps there being some sort of intersection in the permaculture world or other realms? Like, where are you seeing other crossovers happening?
Well, maybe I'll say one more thing and then pass it to you, Erika. And so, what I'd like Erika to talk about is the crossovers that we find in the Institute of Deep Ecology, which Erika and I are members of the management board, and you, Morag, are part of the advisory board, so we're all in the thick of this institute, and there's a big answer to your question in there, in the institute. But the piece that I'd like to say is more historical, because that's kind of what I carry as an 80-year-old. And so I'm remembering the early days of both permaculture and deep ecology, which was kind of at about the same time. Permaculture started in the 1970s, and that's when Arnie Ness coined the term deep ecology. And one of the, working in the conservation of rainforests, I started the Rainforest Information Centre. We started working all over the world to try and protect rainforests in Asia, in South America, in Africa. And it soon became clear that wherever rainforests were being destroyed, one of the engines of that destruction was unsustainable agriculture. There was often other things involved as well, but invariably unsustainable agriculture was one of the pieces. And I'd done my permaculture design certificate twice. So I was very interested in arming all of our volunteers, because the Rainforest Information Centre was and is an entirely volunteer driven organisation, equipping our volunteers with permaculture as part of the toolkit that they took with them when they travelled overseas to see what we could do about rainforest conservation in other places. And so one of the pieces of that was a beautiful early pioneer of permaculture, Lee Harrison, who you know, Morag. She would invite one or two of the Rainforest Information Centre volunteers to have a free PDC with her for 10 or 12 days, whatever it was then, and I would come in for a day and teach everybody deep ecology as part of that. And so that was just like a really early step of just weaving these things together. And in consequence of that, there have been really extraordinary permaculture projects take place in India, in Ecuador, in Borneo, in different places, and in Papua New Guinea. But the one that I'd like to mention, because again, it's a fellow, a friend of both of ours, John Button, that when he went to India to help protect rainforests in India and to work on the reforestation of the sacred mountain Arunachala, he set up a permaculture organisation in Tiruvannamalai in India, and that was central to the whole project that we did of becoming part of that place, and that the permaculture was inextricably woven into the rest of the project. Mm. But anyway, Erika, sorry.
Yeah, Erika, go ahead. And then I have another question. I'm just going to write down the question before I forget.
No worries. Thanks for that. And the permaculture fits so beautifully in here. And also the work of John and Joanna, and deep ecology is, or that work that reconnects is, and I've mentioned before, it's going towards the great turning. And there is a beautiful framework that is offered in regard to how to contribute to the great turning. And there were those three, I guess, dimensions of the great turning. And the first is holding actions, whether it's a defensive life, the forest action that John does. And that holding actions invites the possibilities of alternative structures. And then that second pillar is creating those alternative structures, embodying new possibilities. And that's where I see permaculture fitting in. And John mentioned about agriculture and the beautiful friends down in Port Kembla, Aaron over down there, the Elemental Permaculture, they've got community-supported agriculture. And that's sort of where it fits in as well. And then that third dimension is that shifts in consciousness. It's that it's the culture that helps to support creating those new alternative structures. And what I've seen emerging is a bit of a fourth dimension, is like the healing and reconciliation part, because with any change, there's going to be a fragmentation or a transformation. And that healing and reconciliation part towards the great turning is also that soil that under that work that you see underneath, that helps to allow all of these different ways of contributing to that great turning towards that life-affirming society that we can and hopefully we will be able to live.
Yeah, beautifully put. I want to ask one of you to give a little bit more to the great turning. What are you meaning when you're saying the great turning?
Well, you're on a roll with that, Erika. Why don't you keep going?
I love listening to John. There are three stories that Joanna Macy mentions. There are three stories of our time that we're living where we're living it. And stories are so important because John mentioned earlier about, I think 400 years ago, there was that King James Bible, the one that a lot of our Judeo-Christian societies are founded on. And it said on the first day, God created the heaven and earth. And then by the fifth day, he created animals and man had dominion over. And we accepted that story almost 400 years ago. And I give this, I mention this because it just demonstrates when we give our attention to a particular story, 400 years later, we see that in the legislation that is currently, like, for example, the Biodiversity Conservation Act or the EPBC at the Commonwealth level, it builds a status quo in regard to, it's a domination. It just confirms that story 400 years ago. And so I just mentioned, when we pay attention or we give attention to a particular story and we accept that story, we see it play out, and it's conceptual, but it is contextual when you look at the world that we're living in. And so Joanna offered these three stories of our time, and we're living it at the same time. And it's our choice of which one we want to live in and accept. And the business as usual is the story of, the central plot is to get ahead. And it is competition. It is where corporations have rights. It has personhood. And then the story in the middle, well, they're all playing at the same time, is the Great Unraveling. It's a response to the business as usual. It's the ecological collapse that we see around us. It's the social collapse as well. And we talked about loneliness and all of that. It's that accepting that business as usual. And we're seeing that response. And a lot of people stay in the Great Unraveling. And the Great Turning is what I've been mentioning quite a bit. And it is that life-affirming society. It's where trees and nature and all Earth community have rights and personhood, not corporations. And so that is what the Great Turning is. And yeah, there's more, but I'll let John. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything, John, to that?
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I wanted to ask you about this concept of rights of nature and how it fits with the deep ecological approach and how you've played in that space.
Well, it's interesting because one of the projects that has been very close to my heart for nearly 40 years now is a place in the Andes in Western Ecuador called Los Cedros, the Los Cedros Biological Reserve. And we at the Rainforest Information Center were part of creating Los Cedros. It was back in the 1980s, and it was a time when this very brief honeymoon, just 2 or 3 year honeymoon, existed between the new ALP government, Bob Hawke's government, and the conservation movement, because everybody had witnessed the fact that he had become Prime Minister as a result of a conservation move promise of his, that he promised that if elected, he would stop the dam on the Franklin River in Tasmania that would have flooded the heart of the rainforest wilderness in Tasmania. At that time, the conservation movement in Australia got behind him, and that's how he got elected. And so part of that honeymoon included the fact that the Australian Development Assistance Bureau, part of the Department of Foreign Affairs, had a new funding window called NGOEI, Environment Initiative, where its purpose was to allow $1 million a year for NGOs to create new standards of environmental excellence in the delivery of Australian aid. And so we were part of the creation of that, and we were able to get funding, including the funding that was needed to start the Los Cedros Biological Reserve. And so over the 40 years we've been involved with them, we've, the thing about saving a place is that you've got to save it again and again and again. Once it's destroyed, but once it's saved, it's only saved until the next threat. And so Los Cedros was threatened with illegal logging, with poaching, with land development, with colonisation. And each time volunteers from our group participated, or we raised money, or we did whatever it took. Most recently, a corrupt decision by the then Vice President of Ecuador, who later went to jail for corruption on another matter, but a corrupt decision allowed mining companies to establish themselves in Los Cedros. And we appealed this to a lower court. We won. The mining company, a Canadian multinational mining company, appealed. They won. And over several years and a lot of fundraising, I have to tell you, keeping a lot of lawyers busy, it moved to the Supreme Court in Ecuador, which is the constitutional court. And Ecuador, the Constitution of Ecuador, it's the first country in the world that includes the rights of nature as part of the constitution of the country. Because more than half the people in Ecuador are indigenous, and there was an indigenous uprising at a certain point, and that involved changes in the Constitution in the way that that was resolved. Anyway, we went to the Supreme Court to appeal this mining company, and the Supreme Court sided with us. So although the rights of nature had been part of the Constitution for some years, it had never been tested, it had never been given teeth. And it was this court case that set the precedent, not only in Ecuador, where since that decision 2 or 3 years ago, there have been several other court cases where lower courts used the precedent in order to eject mining from important natural areas on the basis of the rights of nature, but it's also inspiring similar movements in different parts of the world.
Amazing.
Maybe I'll add one more piece to that story, which is that I'm on the board of the Los Cedros Biological Reserve. One of the other members of the board is a musician by the name of Cosmo Sheldrake, one of the sons of the famous Rupert Sheldrake. And Cosmo Sheldrake and friends composed a piece of music called Song of the Cedars. Los Cedros is the Cedars, Song of the Cedars, which included the sounds from Los Cedros and which they said was inspired by Los Cedros. And so they have now petitioned the Ecuadorian authorities to allow Los Cedros to be one of the 4 copyright holders of that song. And so that's never been done before. Like, a place has never held the copyright to a work of art. And that's how the rights of nature, how we're starting to just push boundaries in other kinds of domains.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know he was just recently at the More Than Human event in London with also Monica Gagliano, who's also doing this wonderful work. There's so many people stepping into this. Before we sort of circle back into permaculture again a bit, because I can see there's a question in the chat, and I noted one down earlier, but I wanted to turn to you, Erika, and ask about the law, and how you are seeing these type of conversations showing up in the legal community, in education for young lawyers. Like, what is happening in this space? Are these sort of rights of nature conversation showing themselves forward very much, or is it still very sidelined? What's your experience?
I'd have to defer to Michelle Maloney, and I've popped that in the chat actually. She's the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, and she's been doing fantastic work to progress rights of nature in Australia and the rights of waterways as well. And I think a friend posted in the chat as well in regard to the Blue Mountains recently testing that. And from the legal part of it, I wouldn't know, because I didn't do environmental law. I did commercial litigation, which is the stuff. But I'm not seeing that. I'd highly recommend the work of Michelle Malone, who does fantastic work in that space.
Michelle did a presentation at the Festival of Wild and Kind Ideas. So if anyone wants to go back and have a listen to her work there, I'll post it with the replay to this so you can find your way there. Yeah. She just lives down the road from me here. We often catch up for a good yarn. Definitely recommend her to chat to. Yeah.
But rather, if I might, and then tying it in, the Council of All Beings, or the Interspecies Council, was tested in a UK government, local government setting in 2024, and John, in the Roding Island River case, and it was. They even referenced Joanna Macy's work in doing the Interspecies Council, and they were setting policy for that particular river from a more than human perspective. And it was quite interesting to see policy setting in a local government way of deep ecology practices and philosophies. And that's a really emergent area that I'm quite interested in, using deep ecology practices in being able to write policy, make decisions, or be in halls of power where decisions are made using the practices of deep ecology or philosophy. And we're seeing that also emerging in Norway. And I think there's a friend there who's also posted that they're in Norway too. So it's kind of popping up everywhere. So it's very, new. John, I'd love to.
Thank you. I think, this idea of how, say, for example, Crystal Waters was designed, and that the rights of the river, the health of the river was put as paramount, and everything got designed back from that, and the corridors and the rehydration and the forests, and that the human footprints where they are in the sort of the spaces where we can do least damage and as condensed space as possible, so that as much is regenerated, restored, rehydrated, and protected. And so this deep ecological lens can be applied to all different fields. And so I think that's why it's so important that we find a way to really bring it in, like to work on that ecological self, because there, wherever you show up, you bring it with you, and it shapes whatever you do. The question that I was wanting to bring before, and I noticed that Kestrel also from the Netherlands has asked something similar about if she wanted to introduce just a small piece of deep ecology into a permaculture course, what might that look like? And I wanted to pick up on threads because you were saying before, John, that you used to do that when you went to Lee Harrison's workshops, that, instead of holding, multiple day-long deep ecology, counts of all beings, there was just a short piece. What is a short piece that you can offer into a workshop space that means that there is it lands deeply? What have you experienced that has worked or that you've played with?
Because Arnie Ness called for community therapies to end the illusion of separation, and primarily this work needs to be done in community, it needs to be done in circles of people. But one process that I used to use in the workshops with Lee Harrison, which we also use in our weekend workshops as one of the early processes, is called the milling. And maybe we'll put a link to the milling in the show in the chat, because that's something like many of the processes. All the heavy lifting is done by the intention of the participants, that whenever a circle of people gets together with the shared intention to heal that illusion of separation, Joanna said, the earth comes rushing back in. All of the separation came from our side. The earth never pushed us away. And the moment that we make a gesture of reconciliation, it hardly matters what we do after that. But the milling is a really good process. But maybe I'll mention one other process which I find to be really useful, which is once again.
Where are you? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Let me just. Cherry bomb.
So another process which we'll share a link later on, or maybe Erika can do it while I'm talking, is called Breathing with Trees. And what it involves is remembering our long cycle of partnership between we animals and the plants, where we breathe in the carbon dioxide that they exhale, and they breathe in, we breathe in the oxygen that they exhale, and they breathe in the carbon dioxide that we exhale. And so the process consists of just sitting quietly looking at a representative of the plant world. It could be that Monsterio behind you, any living green a tree or a plant or a blade of grass, and consciously exchanging gases with it, or with him, or with her, or however you want to see it. And so with each out-breath, remembering that ancient cycle of partnership, honouring it, and allowing oneself to feel a kind of an abundance and a generosity with the out-breath, to know that in spite of the bad rap that CO2 has rightfully received lately because of the way that we've been overdoing it, there's a very honourable history there, 2 million years of sharing our CO2 with the plant world, and with each in-breath allowing ourselves to feel infinitely grateful for the life that these plants are sending in our direction. And just notice what happens. 5 minutes for me, 5 minutes is as good as a chiropractic adjustment of just sharing gases with the plant world. It fixes me right up. Whatever problem was ailing me, I'm just much better after I do that. So, and that's a process that can give people quite quickly the actual experience of deep ecology.
Thank you, John. And thank you also, Erika, for dropping in lots of links as well while John was speaking. And also just to point to what Ro said about that she brings deep ecology in right at the beginning through the introduction. And that's what I find I do as well, because it shapes everything. It's like it is the frame through which we're looking at. Everything comes from there. So I noticed that we haven't got that much time left, but I did want to make sure that if anyone had any questions that would be burning in your heart to bring forward, please do so. And if you wanted to pop your hand up, we can bring you, do this little thing. There's a raise hand feature. Feel free to do that. We have a chance for a couple of questions now, if you like. Sorry, I thought there was something that just popped in there. So, John, the work that you're continuing to do in doing deep ecology workshops, you said something about the fact that they are having a resurgence or renaissance. What do you think has been that? Because for 50 years, permaculture has been happening. For 50 years, these deep ecology workshops are happening. And you said there's sort of been an uptick in interest in that. Can you speak to what you think might have been that?
Well, of course, I don't know, but my guess would be that the dominant paradigm is failing. That it's failing to support people. It's failing. It's failing to give us confidence that its solutions are sustainable, are providing us with any kind of future. And so more and more people are looking for a lifeboat. More and more people are realizing that we need a much more fundamental change. Shuffling the deck chairs isn't really the solution any longer. And so although deep ecology has always been very, very popular with hippies, pagans, witches, and permaculturalists, recently a much broader mainstream of people are flocking in our direction. And that's the reason why I've started having 2 or 3 co-facilitators in every workshop that I do, and giving more and more people the opportunity to feel confident to be able to facilitate this themselves, because I'm hoping that this is just the tip of a vast iceberg.
And how might someone become a facilitator like you, like Erika, if someone wanted to do that? Erika, I mean, maybe you could speak to, and I see you, Joe, so I'll bring you in just a minute. But Erika, how did you become a facilitator, and how might someone become a facilitator?
I might answer the second one because I'm just speaking to Kestrel now, and in live, I'm already offering if she's got a beautiful education community center in the Netherlands, and I'll be there in early September, and I've just offered, and that's exactly it. Like this is how you become a facilitator. I can come over and we can share practices, and we can support how to do these things. And it's so beautiful. John has all this open source. This is for everybody. It's not mine, it's not his, it's just for everybody. And it's so beautiful. And that's how I became a facilitator. I stepped in and I had the intention to step forward and take this work and go through it. And Kestrel's doing exactly the same thing, has just invited me to come over to her food forest in the Netherlands and see what happens there. Yeah.
And that's how it goes. It myceliates. It does. It just moves from one to the other, and it keeps on moving. And if you're interested, lean in. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? To reach out to you and
I would add that it's definitely worthwhile to participate in a deep ecology workshop, which is also known as the Work That Reconnects. And if you look up the Work That Reconnects, very likely you'll find workshops taking place not too far away from where you live. And so a good place to start is just to participate in one of those workshops and meet the people from your place, from your country, from your city, from your neighborhood, who are already involved in this and begin to work together with them.
Yeah. Thank you. I noticed Joe's put her hand down, so I think.
I
Oh,
was
Joe.
only just going to ask
Oh, there
them
you are. Hello.
where they were calling in from, where Erika is and where John is. Are they in Australia?
Yes, they John is currently at Narara Eco Village, which is around, is that the Gosford area?
Yeah.
And that's actually where
Oh,
Erika is at the moment, but normally she's in Gadigal land. So
thank you. Thanks.
yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Where are you, Joe?
I'm at the Bunya Mountains, which is southeast Queensland, on Waka Waka country.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Nice to
Thank
see
you
you.
for the speech. It was so terrific to hear you two talking. Oh, it was so good.
Thanks,
Yes,
Joe.
thank you.
Well, it's my turn to thank you now. So thank you, John, and thank you, Erika, so very much for being here as part of our Wild and Kind Wednesdays series. And thank you to everyone who's come here from all around the world. There's a question here from Ro Morrow. Hello, Ro. It's so lovely to see you again in the community here. How do we find the workshops? Hang on, is there a website? Erika, you were dropping websites. Which is the particular one that you think is best for that?
John Seed's ones in particular here in Australia, because there's the ones if you're overseas. I'm not sure where you're calling in from.
From the Blue Mountains.
Brilliant. I'll drop it. I'll just drop it again. It's the Linktree one from John.
Great. So that Linktree for John Seed is where you can find all the links to all the different work. So that's kind of like that one that's just been popped in, Linktree Guy Seed. That has links to all different sorts of things. And that will be the main place. So thank you, John, and thank you, Erika. I might actually be in the Netherlands possibly at the same time as you both too. So who knows what's going to happen. And thank you, John. So you're both running a workshop together. I've just seen here that, John, you're not in person, but you'll be Zooming in to a workshop in New York later on in the year. So if anyone's listening to the replay of this and you happen to be in the Americas, that might be a good place to connect up as well. So thank you so very much. And it's just always a pleasure to be in conversation with you, John. And this is the first time that I've met Erika. So how wonderful to meet you too. Thank you for being here. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Morag. I've got a question, which is there a way that I can copy the chat, because I missed a lot of it, and I'd love to see
if you go up to the top of it, and there you'll find 3 dots, and you click on the 3 dots, and it says Save Chat.
Beauty.
And I will also be saving that and sharing out with the replay, and then
great.
that'll come out in a day or two. And then anyone who wants to share this out further, we would love that as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you're calling in from. Bye.